Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Stephanie Bennett. So happy to have you here with me today. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, what we're going to be doing is diving into my first book that I wrote, which is called The Soul's Return: The Spiritual Anatomy of Narcissistic Abuse, a Healing Guide to Reclaiming Inner Freedom. I also wrote a workbook as a companion to it. There are different exercises than are in the actual book. And then I also created a companion journal to go along with that if you want to do your own inner work. You can use your own journal if you want to, but I thought it would be kind of cool if it all matched. So that's what I did. Now, what I want to do today is slowly go through the concepts in my book, The Soul's Return. There's some new ideas in here that many of you may or may not be introduced to. So, what we want to start out with doing is really talking about why narcissism is so prevalent today. Everyone has run into a narcissist, or maybe five. Um, Somebody's karma somehow meets more of these than other people, but I know that we've all pretty much met at least one or two. There are different types of narcissism, and I think that's what a lot of people don't know. There are a lot of different people producing work on narcissism right now. It's sort of the hot topic. And I want to add my voice to this conversation because I think my work brings something a little bit different to the table. In that, as a transpersonal psychologist, my work really works with the soul. And understanding the anatomy of the soul is absolutely vital to understanding how narcissism works and what it really is. If we don't understand this, we can't understand anything about it, and we certainly can't understand how to heal. In this modern age, the traditional way of dealing with treating narcissism is through psychology. And what I'm saying is that this isn't just a psychological event. Being wounded by a narcissist, narcissistic wounding is its own kind of wound. It's different from any other kind of abuse, and there is a reason for this. It is a soul wound, it is a spiritual wound. It actually fragments the soul. That is why when you treat narcissistic abuse through psychology, you're still left years later, like, I just don't feel good. I just can't quite figure out why I'm not myself again. Like, how do I get back to that person that I was before any of this happened? Well, the reason why is because if you treat the psychology, you're actually not addressing what actually happened to you. So, moving backwards, in order to really frame this conversation in the right way, we have to understand spiritual anatomy. So I'd like to start really explaining the layers of the soul, how the soul works, and then we can go into the dark triad that narcissism operates through. So let's begin. I am going to be reading a lot from my book, The Soul's Return, just so you can get a really good idea what's in here. And I want to specifically go over what some of these vocabulary words mean and how it actually works. I also have some great quotes in the book, which I think I'll start out with one. This is a quote by Rudolf Steiner, who is the founder of anthroposophy. I embrace an anthroposophical worldview, which just means that there is a cosmology and a spiritual anatomy that I look at the world through. The greatest battle of our time is the struggle for the human I, for its freedom, its sovereignty, and its divine origin. Every adversarial force seeks to sever us from this truth, but those who awaken their inner light and stand firm in moral courage will shape the future of humanity. That quote really encapsulates the way I look at having to overcome narcissistic abuse in general. So I don't look at it like it's a terrible tragedy, it's a trauma. It is, but more than that, this is an invitation to initiation, which just means, do you want to become your best version of self? Do you want to become your highest self? This is something to push up against in order to really sharpen your I, that capital S self, the highest version of you, which in anthroposophy is called ego. Ego has sort of got this tainted um, definition to it, which it's not something dark and evil. We all have shadow, yes, but in anthroposophical language, to speak of the ego, that is the Christ in us. That is the light within us. So when I'm using the word ego, I really want you to understand the way that I'm using it. So with that, let's get started. So I want to offer you a quick introduction to soul wounding. Now, narcissistic abuse isn't just a psychological event. It is not just causing psychological harm. It's actually a soul wound. And that is why so many people years later can't figure out, number one, what happened to them, and number two, how in the world are they actually going to heal? If you don't correctly understand how what happened to you happened, then you'll never be able to actually heal. So what is happening in narcissistic abuse is it's causing a soul fragmentation. Your soul actually splinters. The light in you is diminished. Now, this happens in phases, and we will go through all of these phases, but I want to really lay that groundwork out first because it's really important that we move forward understanding that this is a soul wounding. It's not just a psychological event. And that's why so many people are so stuck. They just can't seem to get from here to there. So let's begin. So I want to start out with understanding the double trauma. So the first trauma when you're undergoing narcissistic abuse is that you have these external forces, these physical forces kind of coming at you. You are physically, you're emotionally caused harm, and at some point, these experiences leave imprints on your etheric body. So let's go over what that means. So the anatomy of the human being is you have a physical body, which is very obvious what that is. The etheric body is the body that is the light body. It is giving life to the physical body. So this is the second sheath of the human being. This is where etheric imprints land when you're going through abuse. So the next layer is what anthroposophy calls the astral body. This is also called the soul. And this is a concept that everybody is familiar with. This is the body where your desires live, your impulses, your hopes, your dreams. This is where like your big self, your life kind of resides. This is what makes you kind of what animates you, I guess we could say. So the next sheath is the human I, which is the capital I self with a capital S. So these are the bodies of the human being. That's a simplified version. There are more layers to the soul. There's 3 layers to the actual astral body, soul, but we won't go through that in this video, but just know that that is also out there. Okay, so the etheric body is what governs your life forces. It's what's giving your body life. So oftentimes when people see someone who passes away, you see that little light float out of the body. This is the body that you're seeing. Exit. The human physical body cannot survive without this etheric body. So it just means life. So just think of it that way. And so what happens when someone is narcissistically abused is there's this first invasion that comes through your physical and your emotional realm. So when I'm talking about emotional realms, I'm talking about the astral body, so the soul. So these things come in and they are invaders. They are foreign invaders and they don't belong there. And because they don't belong there, they're going to leave a mark. So what typically happens when someone's undergoing narcissistic abuse for a longer period of time, rather than just like a month, say we're talking about years, that's why these people end up without any life in them. They just kind of end up flat on the couch, flat in the bed, sickly. They just don't have any energy. They don't know who they are anymore. They can't really remember, like, well, who am I? What made me me? What do I like about myself? I can't even remember. that's when the abuse has taken on more of an imprint in these subtle bodies. Now, there is a secondary injury that Steiner talks about with narcissistic abuse, and that arises after the external wound has happened. So, say you're physically abused. This second wound comes at softer layers. So this refers to the soul's reaction to the trauma, which often leads to an internal splitting of the personality. When an individual experiences an external trauma, there can be an instinctive withdrawal or repression of the emotional or the spiritual pain. So this is it is a trauma response at protecting yourself, and he's calling it the secondary trauma. So it takes place when the person internalizes, this is so important, the pain and refuses or is unable to process or integrate the experience. So what happens without integrating an experience, it becomes an island in the soul. And it's sort of an island unto itself. It remains there as a splinter in the eye, as a metaphor. It doesn't fit with the rest. It's just sitting there, and it's going to be aggravating. It's going to be irritating. It's going to beg for integration. And that is something that the healing needs to address. So this is causing the astral body and the etheric body to become disjointed. The person may experience disassociation, denial, or a fragmentation of self. So we've all heard the word disassociation. This is when the person kind of goes into a catatonic state. They're staring off into space. They're not really there. This is the person breaking away in order to preserve the self. It's a response to trauma. And oftentimes, parts of the personality are separated off in order to protect the conscious self from the overwhelming emotional pain. Steiner suggests that this internal rupture is often an unconscious process. I mean, this is what happens to people. They don't really know what happened to them. Leading to further splitting of the soul, where the astral body becomes misaligned with the etheric body and the higher self. This deepens the soul's disconnect from its spiritual essence, and the person is left with a sense of disconnection, fragmentation, and an inability to access their inner divine source. So, as a person who has suffered narcissistic abuse, you can identify with what's happening here. As a person who witnesses another party undergoing narcissistic abuse, this is when you don't recognize them anymore. They would never allow themselves to be treated this way. This is what's actually happening at the soul level. These bodies are becoming disjointed. They're not unified with each other. So the physical body, the etheric body, the astral body, and the capital I self, they're becoming misaligned. They're not integrated anymore. And so this is what is actually going to start causing soul loss. And when I say that, I just mean that you're losing connection to yourself. And this is exactly where the dark forces want you. It makes you an easier target. It makes you more susceptible to what it is they're aiming to do. And just so we're all clear, the goal of the dark forces who are operating through narcissistic abuse, their goal is to siphon your life force. They don't have a life force of their own. Let me explain what I mean by that. People who suffer from narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder are disconnected from their higher self. In traditional psychology, they explain this by saying that this is a trauma response in the attachment phase of the human being, which is between 2 and 4 years old, and they don't have a healthy sense of self. So in order to protect their shame that they experience through not having a healthy sense of self, is they create and project a false self, a false identity. And all of their energy is geared towards bringing up and supporting this false self. Since they are not connected to themselves, They don't have an energy source to feed that false self from. So, in order to support that false self, they need a target. They need someone else to siphon their life force in order to support this false self. They cannot operate alone. So this is what happens when people undergo narcissistic abuse. This is why they end up feeling like, who am I? Why don't I have any energy? Why do I not know who I am anymore? This is what's actually happening. So there are a couple different types of narcissism, and it's really important to understand these different types because they present in different ways. So just because you know what one type of narcissist looks like, when the other type comes along and targets you, you may not recognize it. So let's go over these different types of narcissism. Number one, you have a overt narcissist. This simply means that they're big, they're braggadocious, oh my gosh, what's the word? Braggadocious. They're bigger than life. They take up all the attention in the room. The light is on them constantly. They need everything to be about them. These are so easy to recognize. I mean, you can instantly recognize these people in a moment. These people garner their support by obviously having all eyes on them. They love having the attention. Now, the other kind of narcissist is what is called a covert narcissist, a vulnerable narcissist. These are a little bit harder to recognize, and that's because they go about garnering their supply by more surreptitious means. So they're quieter, they are better manipulators in the sense that you hardly notice what's happening to you. They're more subtle in their approach, they're quieter, they're not braggadocious. Then you have different kinds of narcissists, so different ways that these types of narcissists garner their supply. So, number one, you have a cerebral narcissist. So this person operates by getting their supply by being the smartest person around. They know everything. It doesn't matter if they actually know it or not. They appear that they know everything. They want you to think that they know everything. And they really rely on their brain power in order to garner their supply. A somatic narcissist uses their body to garner supply. We all know what that means. They want everyone looking at them, they're show offs, they expose themselves, they are sexually promiscuous, etc., etc., etc. Now, one one person is not always one type of narcissist. There's no type constancy in narcissism. So what happens is these people move between types over time. So when they've garnered supply through their intellect, if that situation dissolves, they will go into narcissistic injury, narcissistic mortification, and they go into like this hibernation stage. And when they emerge out of this hibernation stage, they generally come back out as the alternate type of narcissist. So they're going to operate in a completely different way. Oftentimes, these people are diagnosed as having bipolar because they appear up and down and manic and depressed. And they're falsely diagnosed as that, but they do appear in this way. And that's because they are moving through the different types. There is a life that it takes on of its own as the narcissism moves through their soul life. So I hope that explains the different types. And I know for many people, when you see this kind, you think you've seen a narcissist. But what I'm hoping to educate people on is there's different kinds of narcissists and there's different ways that they garner their supply. Now, all narcissists are drug addicts in the true sense of the word. They cannot live without this supply. They are absolutely incapable of supplying their own sense of life. That's why they need you so much. So if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, they make up and break up, they're hot and cold, and the reason they can't actually ever give you up, a narcissist will always come back. They will always come back. That is a rule of thumb. The reason why that's true is because they really truly can't live without you. They need your life force in order to support their own. It's like imagine somebody needing your oxygen in order to survive. It's really no different. It's just as simple and cut and dry as that. So I hope that kind of explains that piece. Now, what I'd like to do now is go through the different types of beings that are operating through the narcissist. So in traditional psychology, many of you are familiar with what is called the dark triad. That is Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism. If you want to take this same dark triad and understand what forces are operating behind these events, these cycles of energy, I'm going to name them. And it's might be new information for you. It might seem kind of strange to your ear or even to your sensibility, but if you really want to understand narcissism, this is where we must go, and that is understanding evil. Dr. Steiner did an incredible job of explaining and explicating what evil is, the beings that are involved in this, and I hope that this brief overview gives you an inspiration to maybe understand it better, deeper, broader, do your own research, but for in all our intents and purposes, it's really important that we go through this triad of evil. So, there is one being called Lucifer. A lot of us have actually heard this word, and what Lucifer does is he wants to take you up without actually earning it. So he wants to take you up into like the spiritual world without actually doing the work. He wants to give you high praise, excuse me, without actually it being true. He's going to take you up. Now, in the cycle of narcissism, this is operating at the love bombing stage. Think of what love bombing is. It takes you up, and you're living in this fantasy land of, oh my goodness, this person thinks I'm amazing. Like, it doesn't get any better than this. Well, that's very Luciferic. You have to live on the ground, you know? So the next kind of narcissism is what Steiner calls, and I call Ahriman. Many of you know the word Satan, and that's really the word that's equivalent here. So it's Ahrimanic narcissism. Now, Ahriman wants to take you down into the drudges of hell and drop you on your head as hard as he possibly can and watch you break apart. And this is the devaluation stage and oftentimes the discard stage. So the third force that is operating inside of narcissism is what Steiner calls the Asuras. The Asuras is basically a word for they're the energy that disintegrates something. So when you are discarded, devalued, and then discarded, what is happening, the reason you're flat on your back is because these Asuras are actually coming in and they're eating, they're feeding on your human I, your deepest sense of self. So that's the cycle. So we have Luciferic narcissism. Let me just read from the book so you get a really good understanding of what this actually means. So this is going to be a self-centered spiritual arrogance where someone believes they're uniquely enlightened or chosen, detached from reality. Steiner warned against spiritual vanity and egotism, suggesting that some individuals will use spirituality to elevate themselves rather than to serve the world. We've all seen these people in the news, okay? Ahrimanic narcissism. This would involve deception, control, and a focus on power, money, and materialism. Steiner saw Ahriman as fostering a kind of self-interest that disregards ethical concerns and human warmth. This is cold, calculating, detached harm. We've all seen these people hurt on purpose, and they are cold as ice doing it. That is the being that's operating through that person at that time. Azuric narcissism represents the most destructive and soul-consuming manifestation of narcissism. Azuric narcissism seeks to annihilate the ego entirely, leaving behind a hollow shell devoid of true individuality or moral will. This is when someone's soul body has been completely taken over. So at this point, what I'd like to do is briefly go over the myth of Narcissus and Echo and explain why this is important in the dynamic of narcissistic abuse. So, as we all know, the myth out of Greek mythology of Narcissus, Narcissus is looking at himself in the pool of water, really reflecting on, how amazing, wonderful, beautiful, just incredible he is. But in order to really garner that message, he needs Echo to tell him this. So what he does is he says something and he tells Echo to echo it back to me. So think about when you're in a narcissistic situation, that narcissist is demanding and commanding you to repeat the stories that support the false self. I'm so good to you. Nobody else is as good to you as I have been. You'll never make it without me. Nobody's ever been as good to you as I have, etc., etc. You can all fill in your own material. We all have it. Pull it out right now and think about. These are the messages that they demanded you repeat back to them. This is why, because those messages are propping up this false self. When this false self falls and they don't see it, they're not hearing it echoed anymore, they actually experience shame. And this is the one thing that narcissists will avoid at all costs. When this shame comes to their surface, they turn on you, they start abusing you in any way, shape, or form, verbal, emotional, physical, it doesn't matter. This is where the abuse comes to be visible. So that's why that is happening the way that it is. The myth is really a great example of exactly how this works. Narcissist cannot live at that lake by himself. He needs Echo and he demands her loyalty. This is why. Okay, so I don't want to get too deep into how all of this operates. You can definitely go into that reading the book. What I would like to go over, though, is this sense of emotional vampirism. These people are actually energy vampires. Um, it is them feeding off of your soul forces. So there is an erosion of autonomy. Oftentimes, you'll find in these situations, all of a sudden, you can't make your own decisions. You can't make your own mind up. You certainly can't express your own sovereignty. It is the system is allergic to it, shall we say. Then there's the quiet destruction of willpower. Now, what this is slowly and methodically taking over the agency of the target. So it's really important to understand that this is a gradual process and it's very surreptitious, it's very subtle, and what targets often find is that it's later, much later, that they wake up and they realize, oh my gosh, like what has happened to me? So this process is extremely unconscious. It doesn't happen inside of consciousness. Once you see it, and you see how it happened to you. But when you're living it, it happens very unconsciously. And from this place, we must give ourselves forgiveness. This wasn't our fault. We were simply blindsided and taken advantage of. And the challenge here is to raise our game and to become better from it and for it. So, excuse me. So, defending against this type of narcissism is we strengthen the moral courage and the will, and this is through exercises that I give in the book and in the workbook, a deepening of awareness to prevent soul fragmentation, recognizing and avoiding energetic vampirism that seeks to consume one's life force, recognizing with the I, which is the higher self, to fortify spiritual sovereignty. So this is done through ask yourself what it is that you love to do. What do you love to do? When do you feel most like yourself? These are the types of activities that are curative in this sense. Okay, so let's see. Before I move on too much, I really do want to go through something that is unique to my book. So what I have done, I know you probably can't see it here, but I've done a chart. And what this does is this takes the psychological phenomenon of the abuse behavior and correlates the psychological impact and the spiritual distortion and then the reframe. What can we learn from it? Let me give you a couple examples because for me, this is one of my favorite parts of the book. Number one, love bombing. Okay, that's the abuse behavior. What is the psychological impact of that? That is overwhelm. You become overwhelmed, and there's idealization, and this is where the trauma bond starts forming. Okay, we haven't gone over the trauma bond, but we can in just a moment. Okay. The spiritual distortion is Luciferic glamour, seduction through false light. So, this is very seductive, and I think this is why so many people fall prey to this because it is seductive, right? Okay, so the reframe is discernment. Here's what we can learn. Discernment, true light is calm, enduring, and aligned with the eye. So imagine to yourself a false light. It's captivating, it's alluring, it's flashy, and then visualize a soft light. It's gentle, it's inviting, it's demure. We are entrained in our civilization to go to the flashy light. Okay? The task here is to learn to see and discern one type of light for the other type of light. Okay? Let's go through one more example because I think this might be super helpful for people. Okay, number two, gaslighting. We've all been gaslit. We are gaslit every day in the news. Okay, so self-doubt, disorientation, this is when confusion starts to set in. Well, they love me so much, so why would they want to hurt me? These two things cause cognitive dissonance and creates confusion in the mind, okay? The spiritual distortion here is aromatic inversion. So it is deeply deceptive. It's cold deception. And there is a falsification of reality. Your entire reality gets rewritten when you're being gaslit. No, you can't trust your own experience. What is true and what is real is what I say is real. That's Ahriman. That's Satan. Okay. The reframe here is the higher I reclaims clarity, spiritual perception is restored, and the soul remembers its image bearing nature. I am a child of the Spirit. This is us coming home. This is why I called my book The Soul's Return, because when you heal from narcissistic abuse, your soul comes home. It's a returning, it's a homecoming. And you come home better than you were before. Okay, so that is the next part of that chapter. And I really do think that this is a unique contribution, and I hope that you learn from it. I will try to post it on my social media. I really do think that it's that helpful, so look for that. Then I want to go through a quick saying that I have in the book that I find really helpful. Okay, when the soul trembles in the dark, it is then that the spirit, the I, the capital I, begins to rise, not as a concept, but as a sovereign flame of truth remembering itself. Remembering. When we remember who we are remembering our soul bodies. We are putting ourselves back together. We are membering ourselves in the way that where integration lives and can take place again. In Aramaic, the word for returning to yourself means balancing your bodies so that you are living in an integrated and from an integrated place. So all of the bodies, they fit. So it's like this. This is what narcissistic abuse looks like, okay, as a metaphor, okay? You want to come back to this. This is wholeness, this is reintegration, this is remembering, this is living from your true self, your I, when you can live from a balanced place. I also want to go through the way that narcissistic abuse affects the chakra system. This is actually really important because each phase of narcissistic abuse affects each of the centers in a different way. So, what I would like to do is point out that in the book, I have a chart that goes briefly over the entire way the system works. I don't know if I'll go through all of that now, other than just saying that soul fragmentation occurs um, and affects these centers distinctly. So each one of us is sort of more closely rooted to one or the other chakra. And so depending on where your strength is, where your weaknesses is, this will affect how narcissistic abuse affects you. Now, um, I think too that it's important to really keep in mind that healing occurs in layers. So you can't say, oh, by Tuesday I'm going to be better. It's really more of a journey. So healing is a journey. And I hope that this book takes you through a fruitful journey in understanding how these systems work and how narcissistic abuse affects them, and then how to come out from the other side of it. There are exercises for soul retrieval in the book, and I won't go through those now, but I really do hope that you can enjoy some of these things and really gain a deeper sense of how to heal from these types of things. I think that might be good as an overview for now. I do go into more details later in the book, and I think what I'll do is I'll have the second video go deeper into some of the deeper aspects of how these things work. I really wanted this video to be kind of an overview, give you an introduction, give you an idea of how we're going to talk about these things, how the anatomy works. If you have any questions about anything that I have said or presented, let's hear it in the comments. I will answer each one of you. So thank you so much for being with me here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.